Hey, you all. I think we don't have any Spanish speakers on yet, do we? Because if so, I'll just do the introduction in English for now. So good afternoon. It's a pleasure to be with y'all. My name is Joshua Stallings. I'm with the Community Language Cooperative, and I have the privilege to see a lot of familiar faces here. I want to thank you all again for your commitment to language justice, meaning that everyone in the space has the right to communicate in the language of their heart. And I will be interpreting simultaneously between English and Spanish. And so once I finish talking, we'll go ahead and turn on the interpretation feature. And I imagine that you all are familiar with that, but just a quick reminder, if you're on your computer, the globe icon will appear at the bottom of your screen. You'll select that to be able to choose your preferred language. And if you're on a Zoom application on a tablet or phone, you'll select the three dots, interpretation, and then your preferred language. And thank you very much. If there's any issues with interpretation, please go ahead and let me know, and we can go ahead and get started.
Okay, great. Thank you. Go ahead and select your language. And thank you everyone for coming today. Great. So as I mentioned in the email, I kind of just wanted this meeting to be open to questions or to talk through anything about anything Farm Bill related or any of the federal resources that I sent out earlier this week. Does anyone want to get us started? Go ahead.
Yes, I was briefly going through it, well, for about 2 days. I'm just trying to gain an understanding. I see that we're saying farm bill, the farm bill, but I'm trying to. I know that a lot of things are going through with a play of words, so I'm trying to understand. And I did see some difference than what was on the first farm bill in some wording. Was that to adjust what happened with the first farm bill, or like for instance, we specifically mentioned the matching the part where we match dollar for dollar, have to give that back. We said we gave a specific amount with that. And I noticed in this writing, it says 10% instead of that amount. Is that something that threw that bill off, or does it have nothing to do with that at all?
Yeah, so that's a great question. There's so much context behind the Farm Bill. I actually took a whole entire class on it in law school about just the Farm Bill itself. So I'll just tell you from what I know, it's really complicated. And essentially, I'll try to explain the history briefly, but the Farm Bill is a general title that we've used since about 1930. And it's a law that every 5 years gets signed into law again or reauthorized. So they've used the word reauthorized because they reauthorize the programs that are in the Farm Bill, and also reauthorize the amounts of money that those programs receive. So the Farm Bill is a super duper wide bill that encompasses everything from conservation, crop insurance, commodity crops, to SNAP, and then other random things like research and urban development a little bit, and horticulture and urban gardens. So it has so many different topics within the Farm Bill. And to give a little bit of context on why, originally the Farm Bill just included things that helped farmers, which is why it started out as being called the Farm Bill, because it provided agricultural commodities and insurance and things like that. And then once we wanted to, as a country, introduce food stamps, they thought that putting it into the Farm Bill as well would be the best chance of getting money available for that. So while they didn't think they could separately just go through Congress and get money available for food stamps, they thought, okay, well, if we don't say yes to the commodity money unless they say yes to the SNAP money, then we can have a compromise. So now it's all in one big bill, and it's still a big compromise every time. So every 5 years or so, when they reauthorize the bill, those two major programs of agriculture programs and nutrition programs are put through together as a way to make sure we get both through, since we have a really big problem in this country with agreeing on things. So by having it in one humongous law, it actually seems to be the most appropriate way to get it passed at all, which is kind of unfortunate and definitely causes issues, but it seems to be working kind of so far. So I hope did that explain the context a little bit before I answer your actual question?
Yes.
Okay. So then with your question of like changing it from last time, yeah, that's essentially what it's doing. So 2018 was the last farm bill that was reauthorized, and that created the LAMP program, for example, the local agriculture market program, which does have a lot of matching requirements. And the GusNIP program as well has a lot of matching program requirements, which was also introduced in the 2018 Farm Bill. The concept of produce incentive dollars was before that in Massachusetts. It was called HIP, the Healthy Incentives Project, I think. And that was not within the Farm Bill. That was just a separate thing they did in Massachusetts. And then they brought it to the Farm Bill through, it was originally the Finney grant, but now it's the GusNIP grant. And that is what provides the money for Double Up Food Bucks. And in the 2018 Farm Bill, the match was, and it still is, because we're still in that time frame, 50% cost share or a dollar for dollar match. So now, as this program is being reauthorized through the 2023 Farm Bill, we want to change some of the language that is going to affect how the program is implemented over the next 5 years. So if we can get it changed right now in the 2023 legislation, that'll impact us all the way through 2028. And we want to increase the funding levels that are available through those years, as well as change some of the requirements like the matching requirement. So does that help at all?
Yes, if nobody else have a question, I have another question, but I don't want to hog the thing.
Go for it.
Okay, my next question, knowing what's going on with the SNAP program and how it's cutting, a lot of people lost funding. I've been told, one lady said I went from $143 a month to, I'm down to 97. Then one said I was at 101, something like that stamp, and I'm now I'm at $27 a month. So my question to that, imagine if you had a household, which we know they lost two. Like I have a mother of 5 that came through the market the other day. And she lost quite a bit too. And, she was explaining that she doesn't work, but she, they needed the groceries. So my question to this is I'm sure you guys are, I just feel the need to ask, like, how do you guys come up with the number? I know the match dollar for dollar, but to the way it was talking about SNAP, and I believe it said increase the SNAP allotment to 200 million. Is that correct? Something like.
Yeah.
Do you see that as making the difference as what's going on in the household? Or what is the expectations, the full expectations of the 200 million? How does it address the loss in so many households, if you don't mind?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question that I think Nourish doesn't really have the power to change. So in terms of how we came up with the number of 200,000, that was mostly from the bigger federal groups that we work with, like, for example, the National Sustainable Agriculture Coalition and the Fair Food Network, who I guess have more political power and kind of can know what is potentially possible. So while we probably think that's not nearly enough, I think that these numbers come from a compromise again of what is feasible to actually happen in Congress. Yeah, I think that's kind of all that I can say on the number part. And then the other important part that we are definitely pushing for is the switch from the thrifty food plan to the low cost food plan, which doesn't change how much money the program gets. So as you mentioned, the 200 million for the program allotment, that's like how much money is going to come from Congress and our funds as a country to go to SNAP. That's one part of it. Then the other part is deciding how much money does each person get. So during COVID, everyone's allotments per family and individual were increased because they were using a different equation essentially to figure out how much each person would be eligible for. And now, as you know, with the SNAP cliff and benefits going down, they all just went down in March because they went back to the normal thrifty food plan, which is extremely low numbers that they haven't changed since, I forget. I have it written in
Isn't
the
it
platform somewhere.
1969?
It probably is. I
Well,
don't
they
remember.
updated it for the first time during the pandemic. So it was the first time it had been updated since the 70s. And so
Okay.
I think it got the biggest boost it's ever gotten. So without that, people would have dropped even further back. But then when emergency allotments went away, which was bringing everyone up to the maximum benefit level, it was still a massive drop. It just would have been an even bigger drop without the thrifty food plan changes.
Okay, I didn't realize that. Thank you, Anya. That's really
Mhm.
helpful. So they did update the thrifty food plan during the pandemic as well. And that's what we're using right now.
Yes, and that was actually at the instruction of Congress from the last Farm Bill. So in the
Okay.
2018 Farm Bill, they were instructed to revisit the thrifty food plan, which hadn't been, like, the way it's calculated hadn't been revisited in a really long time. But to Ty's question, it does get updated annually just based on like a baseline inflation. And that happens every October 1st in SNAP. There's a cost of living adjustment. So this past October 1, I think, honestly, all the years blend together for me now since the pandemic.
Yeah.
So I can't remember if it was last year or the one before, is when they changed the new thrifty food plan and did the last cost of living adjustment. And that happens every single October 1, the cost of living adjustment. But usually that's not quite as big as it has been, or as it was
Gotcha.
last time, because they were also changing the thrifty food plan.
Mm-hmm.
But we do know that they're trying to cut it again. That
Yeah.
and I'm just like, even out, pushing double up food bucks in the way that I'm just gonna share with you what was shared with me. Even with the double up food bucks, it only make it be equal to what it was. It doesn't really boost. This is what a household told me. It just kind of even things out. It doesn't give them like a upper hand,
Mm-hmm.
if I can say it that way. And it's not so much because of double up itself. It's just because their food stamps is so low, if that makes sense.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I hear that. I mean, that's going to be a central part of our Farm Bill platform, is the benefit adequacy piece. And we're going based on a marker bill to increase the low cost food plan, which would boost everything up, and then also increase the minimum benefit level, which is $23 right now. But just like, to be real with you all, I think we're going to be fighting to keep
Yes.
the thrifty food plan boost,
Yes.
because Republicans have been actually pushing back on that change that Congress instructed USDA to do, and now they're saying USDA, why, how dare you make that update. So I think, sadly, I think we're going to be playing defense just on that little good change we did get, which I totally recognize is still so inadequate.
I have a question, and it wouldn't just have to be for Becca. I know there are a lot of knowledgeable people in the room. So the Healthy Food Incentives team at Nourish Colorado that I'm a part of is working on developing a social media campaign that some of you heard about at the last FABET. And we're wanting to be really strategic about when we launch this social media campaign. And our goals are to not only boost awareness and understanding across the state of what Double Up Food Bucks is, but also increase funding in the Farm Bill for Double Up Food Bucks, and to influence legislators who have power over the Farm Bill and what happens with the Farm Bill. And a third goal of fundraising. But I wonder if anyone really tuned into the timeline with the Farm Bill and really tuned into where different legislators are at with the Farm Bill, could give some advice about our timing of our social media campaign. Is there a really strategic date for our launch that you might advise, or a really important info for us to know about a late date in the process? What do we know? I hope my question's clear. I want to say about that last part that I just mean, like, at what point would our social media campaigns start to be a little irrelevant on the legislative front? So when I say, is there a late date, I mean, like, at what point will it not be very influential over legislators' positions?
Anyone else can definitely chime in, but from what I understand, we were supposed to have it done by September 30th. That's like the goal set, the Farm Bill entirely, which is not going to happen. It was pretty clear that it was not going to happen even before the debt ceiling issue. And now it seems like that's even more a case of why they're putting all of their effort into that. So it seems like things are getting even more delayed with the Farm Bill. So I should look somewhere. I have a calendar timeline thing that the Good Food for All Collective made that I can share with you, but everything's getting pushed back a little bit. And from what I know, it seems like right now is probably the best time because that's when things are being worked on. But at the same time, it might be wise to also think about the debt ceiling issue, maybe starting after that's handled, since that's kind of going to impact what happens with SNAP, because obviously, well, not obviously, you might know that a lot of the debt ceiling issue, they're trying to cut SNAP and make SNAP harder to access eligibility wise. So if that happens, like you might have a different game plan, you know, for what your social media campaign focuses on. So from what I know, I think that's supposed to be decided by June 1st. Like that's the deadline. But who knows again if that will be followed through with. So maybe waiting until that is kind of thought through, and then there'll be more focus on Farm Bill again. But at the same time, right now is the time for Farm Bill to be discussed, and they're trying to finish the introduction of marker bills, which are the language that will determine what goes into the Farm Bill, and then can be modified from there. But that's like an important cutting time.
This is helpful. And I see Ty's question, can coincide the marketing strategy plan with Q2 to early Q4? And we're a little out of my element. So I'd love if you want to say more about that, Ty, to explain what you mean. I'm not comprehending it.
Hi. No, it's just that I heard like maybe it's getting pushed out after September. So if we just follow that and kind of have a stopping point at Q4, early Q4, I think it should be a good like baseline measure of where you want your marketing plan and strategy to hit.
Thank you. And
Yeah, and I don't, oh, sorry, go ahead.
no, you go ahead, please. I'd love to hear.
I don't know that I have a straightforward idea of when is best for marketing, but I will say that I put a form in the chat, and Representative Caraveo is accepting responses to that until May 29th. So I think there's there's like that shorter term getting marker bills in, and then I think there are all these sort of, it's hard to predict, but there are all these sort of waves of advocacy with a farm bill, of like the House and Senate are both going to pass a version, and then there's going to be a conference committee. And so I think at all of those different stages, there are kind of opportunities. But one that probably will happen no matter what, and I'm sure you all are thinking about too, is just like in August, typically there's a recess and Congress members come back and are doing site visits and stuff like that. So I think that could also be a good time just to be boosting it and getting it on everyone's radar. But yeah, I don't have a very straightforward answer on like when is the moment. It's a great question. I think we'd all like to know when is the perfect moment.
We just don't want to come in too late, we don't want to launch it so early that we don't have our act together with it, like we want it to be solid before we launch it, but we also don't want it to be too late. And we're also, so the other part of my question, if we have a second, or if anyone has any quick answers, was about people. So like we are interested in trying to sway Ken Buck a little bit, even though he's not known for his support of SNAP, for instance. We do see some areas of possible attunement, and is that ill-advised? I mean, does anyone in this Zoom room have a sense of where the points of leverage are with legislators? We know people like Bennett and Caraveo and so on our team, but any other legislators that you all are working on in your work to try to move or budge or sway? I sometimes wonder when our organizations create Farm Bill platforms, like maybe Becca, you could tell me more, like how do we get them read and by whom,
Yeah, I mean, just like what Anya put into the chat, I think that things like those forms are really helpful because they're asking for input, and that's where we can put our input. And then also going and having site visits, I think is really important, and developing relationships. If you just go once, it's not as memorable as if you have long lasting relationships like we know Wendy has created with Donnie Turner, and other organizations have too. I know Hunger Free has, and Blueprint too. But it's really important to create lasting relationships where you're emailing all the time and trying to work together. I think that's the best way. But in terms of people that might be harder to sway, like Representative Buck, I really don't know. Like, other than maybe things like this where people are actually listening to real people, like with social media campaigns or personal conversations. And also, just to let you know, Anya and everyone else, I'm soon going to be sending out that form to everyone too, so that all partners have a chance to respond. But now you all have early access to it right here. So yeah, feel free to do that. They're asking for input from producers, stakeholders, and consumers on how various programs are working for them. So everyone's welcome, it seems. And I don't think they're asking for specific legislative language, just more general ideas, which I didn't expect. It seems, in my mind, I thought too late for that, but apparently not.
Yeah, I mean, I think one other route that, I mean, in terms of like other legislators we've worked closely with, in the past, Representative Neguse has been really great on child nutrition programs. Was like a really great champion around pandemic EBT and things like that. And then we've also worked with Representative Crow's office a fair amount on some SNAP issues, and some of those just sort of happen like figuring out who the champion is also happens naturally, and they can't come to us sometimes because they've heard from constituents about an issue. So like Crow's office took on the issue of SNAP EBT card skimming because they were hearing about it from constituents. And, you know, we were bringing that to lots of, you know, our whole delegation, but they really stepped it up because they were hearing about issues from constituents in their district.
Also just want to lift up what Ty wrote in the chat, that in the VP Advocacy Academy, which I'm not sure what that is, but I assume it's some form of lobbying training. It was mentioned that legislators would trade off and on votes on different issues. So if you vote for this, I'll vote for yours in the other bill, which, oh, blueprints. Thanks. I think that's definitely really valid. And it's all about relationships and networking. There's also something in the chat from Andrea. Do you want to speak to that, Andrea? How will this next efforts get around Tabor?
I just asked that question because I remember, you know, when I first found out about what happened with the bill, that's what people kept telling me is because of Tabor. And I'm just wondering what's gonna make it different this time. What's gonna stop Tabor?
Yeah, so I think I can provide a little bit of context here that the Farm Bill is federal, so it goes through Congress at the national level. And Tabor is something in the Colorado Constitution, so it doesn't apply to any other state or the federal government or Congress. So when we were running into those issues with the Healthy Food Incentive Fund, that funds double up, that's because of the Colorado constitutional Tabor law that you've heard of. So that strictly applies to state money.
Okay.
And everything in the Farm Bill's federal money. So luckily it won't be
Okay.
impacted by that, because that would really be a problem if we had to follow that nationwide.
Good, because I was like, Tabor's not going away, so how are we gonna get around it this time? You know, so that's good to know the difference of that.
But we'll definitely talk about that in 2 weeks. Well,
Okay.
I think because I think 2 weeks from now is when we're going to have a recap of the state legislative session,
Okay,
and hopefully talking a little bit about next year's goals too.
thank you.
We're already at 2:30. I didn't even realize. Yeah, I guess if anyone else has any questions, you're welcome to say them real quick. I can hang on, or you can always email or anything. Thanks for looking at all of those resources. I know it's such a long list, but I think having them in one document is helpful so that you can star it or whatever and then go back to it as needed. I'll mention too that the public comments are in there, which are both already past due, but very interested to see how that turns out once they review all the public comments on the things relating to school meals. Hopefully that will go in the way that it seems like everyone wants it to go, and that will be beneficial. But thanks for coming, and we look forward to seeing you next time.
And if Anya or Ty are interested, and actually, Andrea, I think you haven't necessarily done it either. We have a social media survey I sent out to the FABAT list. If anyone wants to fill that out to help our campaign for this Double Up Food Bucks awareness, it's in the chat, a few comments up. If anyone has time and interest in filling that out for us, it'll just inform our process. We'd be so grateful to have your input. Thank you. And thanks, Becca, for hosting us today.
Yeah, thanks for coming.
Good to see you all.
Thank you.
And thanks, Josh, for being here. Okay. Have a good day, everyone.